There are moments in life where everything seems to align, as though the universe is orchestrating your next move. That's how I felt the evening I met Olivia. After another long week at the office, I reluctantly agreed to attend a dinner party at my friend Mark's house. To be honest, I was dreading the small talk and the forced smiles that typically came with these events. But Mark wouldn't take no for an answer, insisting I needed to get out more. Little did I know, this seemingly ordinary evening would change my life forever. I spotted Olivia the moment I walked in. She stood by the window, her laughter spilling into the room like sunlight. There was something magnetic about her, the way she commanded attention without even trying. She wore a simple dress, but it was the way she carried herself, confident and warm, that caught my eye. As luck would have it, Mark noticed me staring and practically dragged me over to introduce us. Daniel, meet Olivia. Olivia, this is Daniel, the guy I've been telling you about, Mark said with a grin that made me want to throttle him for being so obvious. She turned to me, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. So, you're the famous Daniel, she said, extending her hand. I've heard a lot about you. It turned out Olivia and I had more in common than I could have imagined. We spent the evening talking about everything from work to childhood memories. She told me about her love for literature and her dream of starting a nonprofit to promote reading among children. I shared my own passion for storytelling, which had been shelved in favor of climbing the corporate ladder. By the end of the night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, a spark. Olivia was the kind of woman who made you believe in possibilities. She wasn't just beautiful. She was intelligent, driven, and kind. Our connection only deepened in the weeks that followed. Every moment with her felt like a page out of a romance novel, the kind you scoff at until you find yourself living it. From long walks in the park to impromptu road trips, we built a relationship rooted in shared dreams and mutual respect. It wasn't long before I realized I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. When I proposed, it wasn't some grand spectacle, just the two of us on a quiet evening. I'll never forget the way her face lit up when she said yes, her tears reflecting the candlelight. Our wedding was everything I could have hoped for. Olivia's parents welcomed me with open arms, treating me like the son they never had. Their kindness and support made me feel like I'd won the lottery, not just with Olivia but with the family I was gaining. As I stood there that day, watching Olivia laugh with her parents, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Life wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long time, it felt full. But life has a funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. I didn't know it then, but the perfect start I was celebrating would soon lead to challenges I never saw coming. 6 months into our marriage, life with Olivia felt like a dream. Sure, there were the usual adjustments, sharing a space, learning each other's quirks, and merging routines, but I loved every second of it. Olivia had a way of making the mundane feel special, and I truly believed we were building something lasting. One evening, as we settled on the couch after dinner, Olivia turned to me with a thoughtful look. Daniel, she began, her voice hesitant, there's something I've been thinking about, and I want your opinion. I nodded, setting aside my glass of wine. What's on your mind? She hesitated for a moment, playing with the edge of her sleeve. It's about my parents. They've been struggling lately, especially with my dad's health and the upkeep of their house. I've been thinking, maybe we could move in with them, just for a while, to help out. I blinked, caught off guard. Moving in with her parents? It wasn't what I'd expected. Olivia, I get that you want to help, but living with them? Wouldn't that be complicated? She smiled softly, as though anticipating my hesitation. I thought about that too. What if we renovated the house? We could turn it into a two-family home. They'd have their own space, and so would we. It wouldn't be forever, just until they're in a better place financially and emotionally. Her words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken expectations. I could see the love she had for her parents etched into every syllable. It was one of the things I admired most about Olivia, her loyalty to the people she cared about. But this was a big ask. We'd just started our life together, building a home and a routine that worked for us. Moving in with her parents, even with renovations, would mean sacrificing the privacy and independence we'd worked so hard to establish. I don't know, Olivia, I said carefully. That's a huge change. And renovations can be expensive. Are we ready for something like that? Her eyes softened as she reached for my hand. Daniel, I know it's a lot, but they need us. I can't stand the thought of them struggling alone when we have the means to help. You've always said family is important. This is just temporary. And think about it. We could turn their home into something beautiful, a place where they feel safe and supported. Her plea tugged at my heartstrings. I couldn't deny that helping her parents was the right thing to do, and her logic was sound. But the practical side of me couldn't help but worry about the strain it would put on our marriage and finances. I'll think about it, I said finally, wanting to buy myself some time. Over the next few days, Olivia subtly reinforced her case. She'd show me articles about multigenerational living, talk about the benefits of supporting family, and casually mention her parents' gratitude for even considering the idea. By the end of the week, I found myself caving. Okay, I said one evening as we sat down for dinner. Let's do it. We'll move in with your parents and renovate the house. The way Olivia's face lit up made my reservations feel insignificant. She threw her arms around me, tears brimming in her eyes. Thank you, Daniel. This means so much to me. In that moment, I felt a swell of pride. This was what marriage was about, wasn't it? Supporting each other, making sacrifices, and doing what was best for the family. But as I stared at the paperwork for the renovation plans later that night, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning. Was I doing the right thing? Only time would tell. I thought I had prepared myself for the challenges of moving in with Olivia's parents. I expected the occasional inconvenience, the need for compromises, and maybe a few bumps in the road as we adjusted to living under the same roof. What I didn't expect was the financial bombshell Olivia was about to drop on me. We were sitting in her parents' living room one Sunday afternoon, flipping through renovation plans and discussing timelines. Olivia was excited, gesturing animatedly as she described her vision for the new layout. Her parents chimed in with ideas of their own, their faces alight with hope and relief. As I sipped my coffee, Olivia glanced at me, her expression turning serious. Daniel, she began, her tone cautious, there's something we need to talk about before we move forward with the renovations. I set my cup down, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Okay, I said slowly. What is it? She took a deep breath, her fingers twisting nervously in her lap. It's about my parents' finances. A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. Go on, I urged, trying to keep my voice steady. They're in debt, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. A lot of debt. I frowned, glancing at her parents, who suddenly seemed very interested in the pattern of the carpet. How much are we talking about? Olivia hesitated, her eyes pleading with me to understand. $159,000, she said finally. The number hit me like a punch to the gut. I stared at her, struggling to process what I'd just heard. $159,000? I repeated, my voice louder than I intended. How did that happen? Her parents shifted uncomfortably, and Olivia jumped in to defend them. It's not their fault, Daniel. My dad's medical bills piled up after his heart surgery, and then there were the repairs on the house, and things just got out of hand. I leaned back in my chair, running a hand through my hair. And you're telling me this now? After we've already agreed to move in and renovate the house? I didn't know how to tell you, she admitted, her voice breaking, but I thought, maybe we could handle it together. We're a team, right? A team. The words echoed in my mind as I stared at her tearful face. I wanted to believe that, to trust that we could get through anything together. But this wasn't just a minor hurdle, it was a mountain. Olivia, this is a huge responsibility, I said carefully. You're asking me to not only fund the renovations, but also cover your parents' debt. That's a lot. I know, she said, reaching for my hand. And I wouldn't ask if it weren't important. But they don't have anyone else, Daniel. They've been there for me my whole life. And now it's my turn to be there for them. Please, just think about it. I looked at her parents, their faces lined with worry and shame. I could see the toll this had taken on them, the weight of their struggles etched into every wrinkle. Let me think about it, I said finally, needing time to process everything. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being pulled into a situation I wasn't prepared for. But every time I thought about saying no, I pictured Olivia's face, her eyes filled with hope and love. In the end, my heart won out over my head. The next day, I told Olivia I would do it. I would cover the debt and fund the renovations. Her relief was palpable, and her gratitude was endless. "You're amazing," she said, wrapping her arms around me. "I don't know what I'd do without you." But as I watched her parents smile and nod their thanks, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning. I was stepping into uncharted territory, and something told me this was only the beginning. When I agreed to shoulder the debt and finance the renovations, I knew it wouldn't be easy. But I underestimated just how much it would consume me. My days became an endless cycle of work, bills, and late-night budgeting sessions. The dream of building a comfortable life with Olivia now felt like a distant memory. The renovations began in earnest, and the costs piled up faster than I could keep track. Every day, contractors knocked on the door with questions or invoices, and Olivia's parents were always there with suggestions. "Could we add a skylight in the living room?" her mother asked one day, her eyes bright with excitement. "It would really brighten the space." I bit back my frustration. "I'll see if it fits the budget," I replied, knowing full well it didn't. Olivia was my biggest cheerleader, constantly reminding me how much she appreciated my hard work. "You're doing such an amazing job, Daniel," she'd say, wrapping her arms around me after a long day. "This house is going to be perfect because of you." But her words, though kind, did little to ease the weight on my shoulders. I felt like I was carrying the world on my back, and no amount of gratitude could lighten the load. The strain began to show in small ways. I'd snap at contractors for minor mistakes or find myself sighing heavily whenever Olivia mentioned a new idea for the house. Even her parents' polite requests started to grate on me. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Olivia's father raised his glass in a toast. "To Daniel," he said, smiling warmly, "the man who's given us hope when we needed it most." Everyone clinked their glasses, and Olivia beamed at me, but I couldn't bring myself to smile. As much as I wanted to believe I was doing the right thing, a part of me felt resentful. I'd worked hard to save for our future, and now those savings were disappearing into a house that wasn't even ours to begin with. The comments didn't help either. They were subtle, almost innocuous, but they stuck with me. "You're such a good provider," Olivia's mother would say, her tone laced with admiration. "Olivia is lucky to have someone who takes such good care of her family." Her family. The words echoed in my mind every time I heard them. What about my family? My dreams? Still, I pressed on. I poured everything I had into making this work. Not just my money, but my time, energy, and, increasingly, my sanity. I told myself it was all for Olivia, that this sacrifice was proof of my love and commitment. But deep down, I couldn't ignore the growing feeling that I was being taken for granted. Olivia's parents expressed their gratitude, yes, but their expectations seemed to grow with each passing day. And Olivia, sweet and well-meaning as she was, seemed oblivious to the toll it was taking on me. One night, after everyone else had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of bills in front of me. The numbers blurred together as exhaustion set in, but I couldn't stop. There was always another payment to make, another decision to finalize. As I rubbed my temples, Olivia appeared in the doorway. "Hey," she said softly, walking over to me. "You're still up?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without letting my frustration show. She placed a hand on my shoulder. "You're doing so much for us, Daniel. I don't know how to thank you." I looked up at her, searching her face for any sign that she truly understood what this was costing me. "It's fine," I said finally, forcing a smile. But it wasn't fine. And as much as I loved Olivia, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was slowly losing myself in this endless cycle of sacrifice. I told myself it would get better once the renovations were finished, once the debt was paid off. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind whispered a warning I couldn't ignore. What if this was just the beginning? The day started like any other. I woke up early, brewed my coffee, and prepared for another long day at work. It had been a few weeks since I made the final payment to clear Olivia's parents' debt, and while I felt a sense of accomplishment, I was more relieved than anything else. The constant stress of juggling finances and deadlines had left me drained, but at least now we could breathe. Or so I thought. When I came home that evening, Olivia was waiting for me in the living room. She was perched on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The tension in her posture immediately put me on edge. "Olivia," I said, setting my bag down. "What's wrong?" She didn't answer right away, and the silence stretched between us like a taut rope about to snap. Finally, she looked up, her eyes brimming with a mixture of guilt and determination. "Daniel," she began, her voice trembling, "we need to talk." My stomach sank. Those 4 words never led to anything good. "Okay," I said cautiously, sitting across from her. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for battle. "I've been seeing someone else," she said, the words spilling out in a rush. Time seemed to stop. I stared at her, uncomprehending. "What did you just say?" "I've been having an affair," she repeated, her voice steadier this time. "For a while now. And I need to be honest with you because I'm leaving." I blinked, sure I'd misheard her. "You're what?" "I'm leaving," she said again, this time with more conviction. "I'm moving in with him. With his support, my parents and I can start fresh." The room tilted, and I gripped the edge of the coffee table to steady myself. My mind raced, trying to piece together the words she'd just said. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything I'd done for her parents. "You're joking," I said, my voice low and unsteady. She shook her head. "I'm not. I've thought about this for a long time, Daniel. It's not just about him. It's about me. I feel trapped, and I need to break free." "Trapped?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You feel trapped? Olivia, I gave up everything for you. I paid off your parents' debt. I renovated their house. I've been working myself to the bone for you and your family, and now you're telling me you feel trapped?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to care. "I never asked you to do all of that," she said quietly. Her words hit me like a slap in the face. "What do you mean you didn't ask? You begged me, Olivia. You pleaded with me to help your parents. And I did it because I thought we were a team. Because I thought we were building a life together." She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. "But it's too late. I've made up my mind." I sat there, stunned, as the woman I thought I knew shattered every illusion I had about our marriage. For a moment, I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or laugh at the absurdity of it all. "So that's it?" I said finally. "You're just walking away? After everything I've done for you?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, as if those 2 words could erase the damage she'd done. I stood up, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and disbelief. "You've got a lot of nerve, Olivia. But let me tell you something. You might think you're walking away from this unscathed, but you're wrong. I won't let you or anyone else take advantage of me again." She flinched at my words, but I didn't care. I was done being the dutiful husband, the provider, the one who sacrificed everything while she betrayed me behind my back. As I left the room, my mind was already racing with plans. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. After Olivia's confession, I felt like I was walking through a fog. The house that once felt warm and full of promise now seemed suffocating. Every corner reminded me of the sacrifices I'd made, sacrifices that were now worthless. But amidst the shock and betrayal, one thing became clear. I wasn't going to let her win. I spent the next few days in silence, observing Olivia and her parents as they went about their routines, as if nothing monumental had happened. Olivia had mentioned her plans to move in with her lover, but she hadn't given a timeline. She was either stalling or expecting me to crumble under the weight of her betrayal. What she didn't know was that I wasn't the same man who had poured his heart and soul into this marriage. Something had shifted within me, a resolve, cold and unshakable. If she thought she could waltz out of my life with everything I'd worked for, she was in for a rude awakening. My first step was to consult a lawyer. I spent hours in his office, going over every detail of my financial contributions, from the debt payments to the renovations. He assured me that I had a strong case, especially since the house was legally in my name. Hearing that gave me a sense of control, something I hadn't felt in weeks. Document everything, he advised. Any texts, emails, anything that proves the affair or any financial agreements you've made. The more evidence you have, the stronger your position will be. I nodded, already planning my next move. At home, I began collecting evidence discreetly. Every conversation with Olivia became a mental chess game. I'd ask her casual questions about her plans, her lover, and her parents' involvement, all while keeping my emotions in check. She seemed oblivious to my intentions, mistaking my calm demeanor for acceptance. Her parents, on the other hand, were less subtle. They seemed to walk on eggshells around me, their guilty expressions betraying their unease. I overheard them whispering one evening, discussing Olivia's decision in their hopes that I would be reasonable about the situation. Reasonable. The word almost made me laugh. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I also made sure to secure my assets. I updated my bank accounts, changed passwords, and ensured that my finances were airtight. Olivia might have thought she held all the cards, but she was wrong. The hardest part was maintaining the facade. There were moments when I wanted to explode, to confront Olivia and her parents with the full force of my anger. But I knew that losing my temper would only give them ammunition to use against me. So I stayed quiet, playing the role of the dutiful husband for just a little longer. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Olivia brought up her plans again. "I've been talking to him," she said, avoiding my gaze. "We're thinking of moving out by the end of the month. That should give everyone enough time to adjust." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. "Sounds reasonable," I said, though the words tasted bitter on my tongue. She looked relieved, mistaking my calmness for compliance. "Thank you, Daniel. I know this isn't easy, but I appreciate you understanding." I wanted to laugh at the irony. Understanding? She had no idea what was coming. Over the next few weeks, I finalized my plans. I worked closely with my lawyer, ensuring every detail was accounted for. I secured ownership of the house, gathered evidence of her infidelity, and prepared for the inevitable showdown. There were moments when doubt crept in, when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But then I'd remember the look on Olivia's face when she told me about her affair, the calm confidence in her voice as she declared her plans to leave me. That memory fueled my resolve, reminding me why I couldn't back down. By the time the end of the month rolled around, I was ready. Olivia and her parents were still under the illusion that they held the upper hand, but they were about to learn the truth. The game wasn't over, not by a long shot, and this time, I was playing to win. The end of the month arrived faster than I expected. Olivia and her parents spent the week packing their belongings, their excitement thinly veiled under polite smiles. I watched them move through the house as if they already owned it, their hushed conversations and furtive glances a constant reminder of how little they thought of me. The day they planned to leave, Olivia approached me in the living room. She looked radiant, almost glowing, as if the prospect of her new life had given her a fresh start. "Daniel," she began, her tone light but cautious, "I wanted to say thank you for everything. I know this situation isn't ideal, but I'm glad we can part on good terms." I stared at her, marveling at the audacity. She truly believed she had won, that I would simply fade into the background while she and her lover built a life on the foundation of my sacrifices. "You're welcome," I said smoothly, keeping my voice even. "I've always wanted what's best for you." She smiled, clearly mistaking my calmness for acceptance. "We'll be out by tonight," she continued. "I think it's better this way. A clean break for everyone." I nodded, watching her closely. "That sounds reasonable." As the day wore on, the house buzzed with activity. Boxes piled up by the door, and movers came and went, carrying away the life I had built piece by piece. Olivia's parents hovered nearby, their excitement poorly concealed as they whispered about the fresh start awaiting them. By evening, the house was nearly empty. Olivia and her parents stood in the living room, surveying the space with satisfied smiles. "Well," Olivia said, turning to me, "this is it. We're heading out now. I'll send you the paperwork for the transition." I raised an eyebrow, feigning confusion. "Transition?" She frowned slightly, as if I had forgotten a key detail. Yes, the transfer of the house. You know, since we'll be taking over, it just makes sense for us to have everything in our name now. I chuckled softly, shaking my head. Oh, Olivia, you really thought this was your house? Her smile faltered. What are you talking about? I leaned against the doorway, crossing my arms. Let me clarify something for you. This house? It's mine. Legally, financially, and in every other way that matters. The renovations, the debt payments, the title, all of it is in my name. You and your parents have no claim here. The room fell silent. Olivia's parents exchanged nervous glances, their earlier excitement replaced by unease. That's not possible, Olivia said, her voice shaking. We agreed this would be a fresh start for my parents and me. You said. I said I'd help. I interrupted, my tone sharp. And I did. I paid off the debt, funded the renovations, and gave you and your family a chance to get back on your feet. But let's be clear. I never gave you this house. Her mother stepped forward, her face pale. Daniel, surely there's been some misunderstanding. Olivia told us. I don't care what Olivia told you, I said coldly. The facts are simple. This house belongs to me. And now, I want all of you to leave. Olivia's jaw dropped, her disbelief evident. You can't do this, she whispered. Oh, but I can, I replied, pulling out the paperwork from my lawyer. Here's the title in my name. And here's the legal notice of eviction. You and your parents have until the end of the week to clear out completely. If you're not gone by then, I'll have the authorities escort you out. The color drained from her face. Her father muttered something under his breath, but her mother silenced him with a glare. Olivia, however, wasn't ready to give up. This isn't fair, she said, her voice rising. After everything we've been through, you're just going to kick us out? I met her gaze, my expression unwavering. You made your choice, Olivia. You decided to betray me, to build a life with someone else. You don't get to take what's mine on your way out. For the first time, she looked truly afraid. The confidence she had worn like armor cracked, revealing the uncertainty beneath. Daniel, please, she began, but I held up a hand to stop her. It's done, Olivia. You've made your bed. Now you get to lie in it. As I turned to leave, the weight of her betrayal finally began to lift. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control, a glimmer of hope for the future. The tables had turned, and now, it was my turn to walk away. The house was eerily quiet after my declaration. Olivia and her parents stood frozen, their faces a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. I could almost see the gears turning in Olivia's head as she tried to process what I just said. Her usual confidence was gone, replaced by a vulnerability she'd never shown before. This isn't over, she said finally, her voice trembling. Oh, it's over, I replied, my tone cold and final. You and your parents have taken advantage of my generosity long enough. It ends now. Her father, who had been silent until this point, stepped forward. Daniel, let's be reasonable here. We've put a lot of effort into this house too. Surely we can come to some sort of arrangement. I raised an eyebrow, suppressing a bitter laugh. Effort? You mean standing around while I worked myself to the bone to fund the renovations? Paying off your debts? You contributed nothing to this house, and you know it. His face turned red, but he didn't argue. Olivia, however, wasn't ready to back down. You're being cruel, she said, her voice rising. This isn't who you are. I stared at her, unflinching. You don't know who I am anymore, Olivia. You destroyed the man I used to be the moment you betrayed me. Now, I'm someone who refuses to be walked over. You made your choices, and now you're going to live with the consequences. Her mother, who had been wringing her hands nervously, finally spoke up. Daniel, please. We've always been grateful for everything you've done. Surely we can find a way to work this out. Think of Olivia's future. Olivia's future? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. That's rich coming from the woman who stood by and watched while her daughter betrayed the man who made all of this possible. I took a step closer, my gaze hard. Here's how it's going to work. You have until the end of the week to pack your things and leave. If you're not gone by then, I'll have the police handle it. Olivia's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. Daniel, Please don't do this, she whispered. Don't do this? I repeated, shaking my head. You did this, Olivia. You made the choice to cheat, to lie, to take advantage of me. This is just the fallout. She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop her. Save it. I've heard enough excuses and lies to last a lifetime. You've already lost my trust, my respect, and now, this house. It's over. Her parents looked at each other, clearly unsure of what to do. Finally, her father sighed and muttered, "Let's go." Olivia's head snapped toward him. "Dad, we can't just leave. This is our home." "No, it's not," he said quietly, his shoulders slumping. "Not anymore." I watched as they shuffled out of the room, their defeat palpable. Olivia lingered for a moment, her tear-streaked face a picture of anguish. "You'll regret this," she said, her voice trembling. I met her gaze, unflinching. "The only thing I regret is trusting you." With that, she turned and walked out the door, leaving me alone in the house that was finally, truly mine. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, relief, and a sense of finality. This wasn't how I'd envisioned my life, but at least now I had the chance to start over. For the first time in months, I allowed myself to breathe. The weight of their betrayal was still there, but it felt lighter somehow. I had stood my ground, reclaimed my dignity, and taken back control of my life. The house was quiet now, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like a clean slate, a chance to rebuild not just the physical space but my own sense of self. As I walked through the empty rooms, I couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, and this time, I was determined to build something that no one could take away from me. In the days after Olivia and her parents left, the silence in the house was almost therapeutic. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of the world. But the battle wasn't over yet. While I had reclaimed the house, I knew there were loose ends to tie up, and those involved making Olivia and her parents face the consequences of their actions. I spent my evenings poring over documents, bank statements, and text messages. Every receipt for the renovations, every proof of payment for the $159,000 debt, and every email exchange about the house was meticulously organized. My lawyer, Mr. Cartwright, was impressed by the evidence I had collected. "This is more than enough to file for divorce and seek financial compensation," he said, tapping the stack of papers on his desk. "Compensation?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. He nodded. "Yes. Given the circumstances of her infidelity and the financial burden you've shouldered on her behalf, you're entitled to demand reimbursement. Not just from her, but also from her parents. Their debt became your responsibility, and now it's time to hold them accountable." I leaned back in my chair, considering his words. Part of me felt guilty for even entertaining the idea. Despite everything, there was a small voice in my head that whispered, "Let it go. Move on." But another part of me, the part that had been lied to, used, and betrayed, knew this wasn't just about money. It was about justice. We filed the divorce papers the following week. Olivia was served at her new boyfriend's apartment, a poetic twist of fate that didn't escape me. From what I heard through mutual acquaintances, her lover wasn't thrilled about being dragged into the mess. The news of the divorce and the accompanying financial demands hit him like a freight train. A few days later, I received a frantic call from Olivia. "Daniel, what are you doing?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "I'm doing what's fair," I replied calmly. "Fair," she spat. "You've already taken the house. Now you're going after my parents? They don't have that kind of money." "And yet they expected me to have it," I said evenly. "I didn't force them into debt, Olivia. I didn't make them rely on me. That was your decision, and now it's time to face the consequences." She fell silent, her breathing heavy on the other end of the line. "You're cruel," she said finally. "No," I said, my voice firm. "I'm done being a doormat." The legal proceedings moved swiftly. Olivia's parents tried to argue that they had no obligation to repay me, claiming that my help had been voluntary. But my lawyer dismantled their arguments with ease, presenting a timeline of events that clearly showed how I had been manipulated into taking on their debts. The court ruled in my favor. Olivia was ordered to pay alimony for the emotional distress her betrayal had caused, and her parents were held responsible for reimbursing a portion of the debt I had covered. The amount wasn't as much as I had hoped for, but it was enough to make a statement. The fallout was immediate. Olivia's lover, faced with the financial strain of supporting her and dealing with the legal mess, decided he'd had enough. He ended things with her, leaving her to deal with the consequences alone. Her parents, already struggling, were forced to sell off what little assets they had to meet the court's demands. The smug satisfaction they once wore had been replaced by resentment and regret. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of closure. It wasn't just about the money or the legal victory. It was about reclaiming my life and showing them that I wasn't someone to be taken advantage of. But the journey wasn't without its lessons. As I stood outside the courthouse, watching Olivia and her parents walk away with their heads bowed, I realized that this experience had changed me. It had stripped away my naivety, replacing it with a cautious resolve to protect myself and my future. I had fought for my dignity, my financial security, and my peace of mind. And while the scars of betrayal would take time to heal, I knew I was stronger for it. Justice had been served, and with it came the freedom to move forward, a freedom I planned to embrace wholeheartedly. The house was finally quiet, not the heavy, suffocating quiet it had been when Olivia and her parents were here, but a peaceful, liberating kind. It echoed with potential, a blank slate waiting to be filled. I walked through the empty rooms, my footsteps the only sound. Each space felt like a reminder of what I'd endured and, more importantly, what I'd overcome. It had been a long and grueling battle, emotionally, financially, and legally. But as I stood in what used to be our shared living room, now stripped of Olivia's decorative touches, I realized I wasn't the same man who had entered this house months ago. The version of me who believed love was about sacrifice at all costs was gone. In his place was someone stronger, wiser, and far less willing to compromise his worth for the sake of someone else's comfort. The first thing I did was take a week off work. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd neglected until I was left alone with my thoughts. No more legal battles, no more sleepless nights worrying about money or betrayal. For the first time in years, I had nothing but time. I filled it with things I'd forgotten I loved. Long morning runs that cleared my head and reconnected me with the world outside these walls. Afternoon coffee breaks at the local cafe, where I'd sit by the window and people watch. Evenings spent reading books that had been collecting dust on my shelves for far too long. But it wasn't just about finding joy in the little things. I also started to think about what I wanted for my future, something I hadn't done in months. It wasn't just about financial stability or career success anymore. It was about building a life that was truly mine. I reached out to old friends, people I'd unintentionally drifted away from during my marriage. To my surprise, they welcomed me back with open arms. Mark, the friend who had introduced me to Olivia, invited me over for dinner, his way of apologizing for what he jokingly called the worst matchmaking in history. "You're better off without her," he said over a beer, clinking his bottle against mine. "Now you get to start fresh, and trust me, man, that's a gift." His words stuck with me. A fresh start wasn't just an abstract concept. It was an opportunity to rebuild every aspect of my life on my own terms. I threw myself into my work, not as a distraction, but as a way to reclaim my sense of purpose. I reconnected with my passion for leadership, mentoring younger employees, and taking on new challenges. My efforts didn't go unnoticed. Within months, I was promoted to a regional director position. Financially, I was in the best shape I'd ever been. With no debts weighing me down and the legal proceedings behind me, I finally felt secure. I even treated myself to a trip, something I hadn't done in years. 2 weeks in the Maldives, soaking up the sun and letting the ocean waves wash away the last remnants of stress. But the biggest transformation was internal. I no longer felt the need to prove my worth to anyone. I'd learned to set boundaries, to recognize red flags, and, most importantly, to trust my instincts. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a glass of wine, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt a deep sense of contentment. The house, once a symbol of betrayal and sacrifice, now felt like home. My home. It wasn't just the physical space that had changed, it was me. I had faced the worst and come out stronger. And while the scars of the past would always be there, they no longer defined me. As I sipped my wine, a thought crossed my mind. This was just the beginning. Life had thrown me a curveball, but I'd caught it, and now I was ready for whatever came next. The future was mine to shape, and for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to embrace it.